Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to talk about the second part of your 15th unit soil, which you get in your grade 7 lessons. Now before watching this, let me start off by telling, if you are new to my channel, I suggest you watch the previous part before you come to this channel, and don't forget to click on the like button and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this lesson and understood it very well. Now without any delay, let us start off with the lesson. In this topic we will be talking about several other subtopics. Now our first subtopic is the composition of soil. So over here, to begin this topic, we are going to start off by doing activity 15.3. Now this activity is basically designed in order to separate various components you get in soil. Now how are you going to do this activity? To do this activity, you are going to need a couple of things. You are going to need a polythene tube, a thread, and some water, and of course a soil sample. So you can simply take a long polythene tube like this, measure something around say 50 centimeters, and you can simply cut it off. Then you can use your thread and tie one end of it from here to, you can use the thread and tie one end of it and get something like this. Basically over here you can see a tied end of a polythene tube. So you can simply tie it and you can get something like this. Then you are going to fill 3/4 of this tube with water. Now what do you mean by 3/4? So if you take this tube, we can simply before I start that off, let me simply a bit erase a part. Yeah, okay. So you can use the thread and tie this up, tie one end up. Once one end is tied up, you can simply divide this bag into 4 parts like this. You can divide it into equal sized 4 parts, and you are going to fill 3 of these parts with water, and here this is 3/4. This area that I have shown is 3/4 of this whole tube. Once you fill 3/4 of the tube with water, you can put some water first. You are going to go to your garden, it can be in your school, your home garden, wherever it is, and take a sample of soil. So once you get the sample of soil, you are going to add this sample of soil into this water. Already 3/4 is filled with water. This remaining little you are going to fill with soil. And then once you are done filling it with soil, you can simply cover this part also if you want, the upper part also, using a thread, and leave it for some time. Then you will be able to observe something spectacular. You will be able to observe that various components of soil has been separated like this. You will notice that at the bottommost layer you get some very large particles that were found in the soil, such as gravel. Then you get large particles but smaller than gravel, like hard sand. Above that you are going to get some silt, and above that you will get clay, and then you will also get some clay with like several particles of water. And of course if there were any dead plant or animal parts, then those will be visible on this upper layer, and the rest of the bag is going to be filled with plain water. So once you set this setup like this, you will be able to have this observation. Now if you do this practical, you will be able to understand some things. The first thing that you will be able to understand is that soil is a mixture of different components. Now you can see this soil had gravel, sand, silt, clay, and water particles, plants and animal parts, so many things. So they have different components, and the ratio of these different components vary from soil to soil. Now if you took a sandy soil sample, now sandy, loamy, clay soil, we discussed about these things in the previous video. So if you cannot remember them, or if you are not sure what these types of soil are, again it's best if you watch that video, and I will put the link to it down in the description below. Anyway, coming back to this lesson, here if you take sandy soil, you will notice that 80 to 100% of the components over here will be sand, then something around 0 to 10% silt and clay. Now if you take a loamy soil sample to do this practical, you will notice 25 to 50% of it is sand, and then 30 to 50% something like silt, and also you will notice that 10 to 30% you get clay. So if you take a clay soil sample, you will notice 0 to 45% of sand, and if you have another look, you will see 0 to 45% of silt also, and 50 to 100% of clay. Now when you take a look at each of these, now in the sand sample, highest percentage is sand, then silt a very little, and clay also a little. So if sandy soil, you will have lots of sand in this soil. If it's loamy soil, you will have a lot of, again, sand and silt. If it is clay soil, then you will have a lot of clay. So the ratio of these components will vary based on the type of soil. Okay, now with that we are coming to the components of soil. Now there are 4 main components of soil. So you get solid components. You get some solid components like soil minerals, organic materials like humus. Now here this is a small picture of some humus. Here you can see some humus particles. Now soil organic materials are basically what we call humus, and they are solid, so are soil minerals. So as you all know, solid is basically anything that is not liquid or gas. So that we will be talking about in a lesson called states of matter, where I will be teaching that lesson in the near future. So stay tuned to learn that lesson. Then our next component is soil air, and you also have water and various soil organisms. So you can see over here, almost majority of the soil comprises of solid parts like minerals and organic materials, and then the other half comprises of water and air. And water and air is obtained in, you can find water and air in the porous space you get in soil. Now we will be talking about the pore space further on in this video, and here you can see some pictures of some soil organisms. There are some microscopic soil organisms like these, and there are some soil organisms you can see for your naked eye like these. Okay, so we are going to talk about each of these now. Okay, our first and foremost, we are going to talk about soil minerals. So what you must understand is soil minerals are solids that you find in the soil, and normally they are sand, silt and clay components. So what are the functions of these soil minerals? Now normally there are various soil minerals like magnesium, calcium and so on and so forth, nitrogen. So these minerals will be taken into the plants, and the plants will get enough and more minerals for its growth. So basically minerals are obtained from the soil and it helps to plants to grow. Also we must understand that water and minerals both are retained by clay particles in soil. So you can find a lots of this water and minerals in the clay particles of soil. Okay. Next up we are going to talk about organic materials, aka humus. Now what do you mean by soil organic materials or humus? In simple terms, they are the decayed or the dead plants and animal parts we find in soil. So now here you can see a nice picture of this well decomposed plants and animal parts, and this is basically humus. Once this plant and animal parts is very well decomposed or decayed. Now what are the functions of soil organic materials, also known as humus? First and foremost, its main function is that it acts as a storage of nutrients that are essential for the growth of plants. Just like minerals, this soil organic materials or humus has lots of important nutrients that are essential for the growth of the plant, so it stores them. Further on, as you can see here, it's a bit like, you can see it's a bit sort of like moist, and it has this porous like structure. When you have a good look over here, you can notice that. So we can say that the capacity of retention of air is quite good over here. And also you must understand that this soil is going to be preventing this humus will prevent the soil from, you know, like cracking up during dry seasons. If you see a picture of a drought, you might have seen during drought seasons the flows start to basically crack up, and you can see this flow is splitting. Now this humus in the soil is going to prevent that from happening during dry seasons. And at the same time, like I have said earlier, you can see a bit moisture in this, no? So that means it can hold a lots of water in it as well, so it can retain water in it. Anyway, moving on to the next one, it is soil air. Now soil air is the air retained in soil particles. Now what do you mean by that? Basically it's the air particles we find in soil. Now when you have a look over here at this picture, this particular picture, you can see here there are certain air particles. Here there are air particles, and these over here that you see in brown color, those are soil particles. Here these are soil particles, and this open blue color space is comprised of water particles. This open blue area has water in it. Now what you can understand by this is that there is some sort of like an empty space, or there are some spaces in between these soil particles, and those spaces are occupied by water and air. So therefore we get a porous structure, which we will be further on talking about it further on in this video, so stay tuned for that. And now what we must understand is there are air particles in the soil. So how can you confirm? Okay, now I said there are air particles. How are you so sure if there are air particles? For that, there is a very small experiment we can do. We can simply take some soil sample from anywhere in our garden, or I don't know, anywhere you want, and simply put it into a glass of water. So you simply take a glass full of water like you can see over here, and then put a soil sample into it. Now here in this picture, this is the soil, and this is the glass, and here this is the water. So if you do this practical, you will notice that over here gas bubbles are appearing. Over here you can see gas bubbles or air bubbles are coming out. Now why is this happening? Yes, we will talk about it further on in the video. But for the moment, just remember, I told you there is some space, right, that is occupied by air in this water. Now what happens over here is that space, water, the glass is filled with water, and that excess water is going to be absorbed by this soil, and then it's going to occupy the space of the air, whereas the air will seep out of this soil sample in the form of gas bubbles. Okay, so we are going to do an activity to get a clearer understanding about this. Okay, so this is activity 15.5 from your textbook. Yeah. So our main aim over here is to prove that soil contains air. Now what we're going to do is simply take some glass vessels, like here you can see some pictures of some glass vessels. So we are going to take some glass vessels like these. Then we are going to fill one glass vessel up to a height of say 4 centimeters with some soil, and another glass vessel again up to 4 centimeters with another sample of water. Then what we are going to do is simply add this water sample into this soil sample, and then you will get this soil plus water sample. Now when you do this thing, you will be able to observe that the soil level, when 4 centimeters of water level is added to 4 centimeters of soil level, it gave a total height lesser than 8 centimeters. Okay, now I have clearly mentioned it here, it's going to be lesser than 8 centimeters. Now we are going to find out why is it. Now as you can see here, normally, okay, irrespective to whether it's water or soil, according to maths, 4 plus 4 is equals to 8. So you should get 8 centimeters, right? But we don't get 8 centimeters. We get something lesser than 8 centimeters over here. So why is that? That is the big question here. And we are going to talk about that over here as well. So over here you could simply say like it has the water level, or the level has risen up to say 7 centimeters. We'll assume it's 7. It cannot be 7 exactly unless we do the experiment, and the soil samples are going to vary. But let's just assume that the sample, this up to here, the height is 7 centimeters, and move on with the practical. Now I told you the big question here is, why is the height lesser than 8 centimeters? Now this is the, you could say, lesser than symbol in maths. I think you all have learned it. It's the lesser than symbol. Anyway, now the reason for this is that, like I had said earlier, when you took that beaker sort of a thing, you might have noticed that over here it was the soil sample, and here let's say water. Yeah, and if you took the measurements, it's something around 7 centimeters. Now if it's 7 centimeters, we are curious. We must say, okay, it has filled up to 7 centimeters, but then what happened to that 1 centimeter? Okay, so what has happened to that 1 centimeter is that this 1 centimeter has been taken over by the air. Hence 1/4 of the volume of soil contains air. Okay, that we must understand. So we can then come to a conclusion that soil contains air. Like I had said earlier, this soil sample has some pores, and in those pores you get air. So when you add water into it, that water is going into those pores, filling up those area with gases and pushing the gas out of this sample. So that 1 centimeter has been occupied by that air. Now in that activity, the reason for bubbles coming out, like I had said many times earlier, when the soil clod, you can call it a clod, is put into water, water is going to get filled into the space between the soil particles where air is filled in them. Therefore, the air which was in those spaces come out as bubbles. I had explained this earlier. So here is a very live figure of it. You can see air bubbles over here, all over. This is a soil clod and air bubbles are coming out. Here air bubbles, it's the same picture I explained with. Now over here you can see there is no pore space. That means no water, no air, no nothing. So even if you add water for something like this, then if you add if the amount of soil filled up to say 4 centimeters and then you add 4 centimeters of water, then here, since there is no pore space, water won't go into any pores because there is no pores. Therefore over here then it could be something around 8 centimeters when you mix the water and the soil sample together. But take a look over here. Here you can see there are lots of pore spaces, and that means here you can get water as well as air. So if you add water into this place, water is going to occupy the space of air, and air is going to come out as air bubbles. They are going to come out as bubbles. Okay, now this is something, a very important concept. That's why I had kept on emphasizing on that on and often. Anyway, now we are going to talk about the functions of soil air. Now one of the main functions of the air you get in soil is that it helps, or it basically is needed for the respiration of soil organisms and plant roots. Now you have various organisms in soil as well as plant roots. So they need to respire because they all are living organisms. Therefore you need these air. The air provides required gases for them to respire. Then for germinating seeds like these, they also need various gases which they can get through soil air. And again, the porosity in soil is created by these air particles. Therefore it can simply store more and more gases and air, which will help with the other two. So those are the main functions of soil air. Anyway, moving on, our next one is soil water. Now the water that is retained in soil particles is what we call as soil water. So soil water is the water that is retained in soil particles. Now like in my previous diagram, you get air particles and also soil particles, and between them you also get some water particles. Now to identify whether soil contains water, we are going to do a small activity. We are going to take a sample of soil into a test tube, and then we are going to use a Bunsen burner and heat the soil up. And you can use something like a watch glass or basically a small glass sort of a thing and place it on top. But make sure you take extra caution when handling this, because suddenly the glass might burst or the heat might affect you all in a negative way, or the gases are also surround, like you use gas when you light the Bunsen burner, so there could be a sudden leakage and an explosion. So when you handle Bunsen burners under the supervision of an adult, I suggest you try out these activities. So you don't need necessarily to use a Bunsen burner. You can simply take a certain bowl and put some soil into it and keep it on the stove or light a candle and heat it up and collect whatever the gas particle you get from these on some sort of a lid, or in this case a watch glass or something like that. Then once these things are collected, we are going to identify what are these drops by adding a bit of anhydrous copper sulfate. Now when you add some anhydrous copper sulfate and water together, what's going to happen is, now here you can see some anhydrous copper sulfate and it's white color. Okay, anhydrous copper sulfate is white in color. Here you can see some water droplets. So when water is added to anhydrous copper sulfate, it turns blue color. So this is something we should remember. Whenever anhydrous copper sulfate is added into some water, or when some water is added to anhydrous copper sulfate, which is white in color, turns blue. So what you're going to do is you're going to collect these droplets into some, you can use a watch glass or something that can retain the heat as well, and then add a bit of some anhydrous copper sulfate to it. Then this anhydrous copper sulfate will turn blue color. Then we can conclude that soil contains water. Now this copper sulfate, in that case you can use a certain type of another thing called anhydrous cobalt chloride. Now this is normally blue in color. Its original color without water is blue. When you add some water into it, it turns pink. So we must remember, okay, if it's anhydrous copper sulfate, it's white in color. When water is added, it's going to turn blue. If it's anhydrous cobalt chloride, its original color is blue and it's going to turn into pink. So this is not that essential, but it's best to remember this because this is something important for your upper grades. But for your moment, I suggest you all remember that anhydrous copper sulfate is originally white and it turns blue when water is added. Okay, so with that we can confirm water is present in soil. Now over here, as I had said earlier, when water is added into copper sulfate, anhydrous copper sulfate, which is white in color, so anhydrous means like dry or not hydrated. You're hydrated, the word hydrated normally means you have lots of water, right? Anhydrated means like you're dry, you don't have lots of water. So when you add water, it's basically going to turn into blue. Anyway, we are now going to talk about the functions of soil water. Now, like I said earlier, we have various soil organisms, so these fellows also need water for their survival. And plants absorb lots of nutrition from this soil water as well through their roots. And at the same time, this soil water is going to help control the temperature of the soil. So if you do not know about the special functions of water, I made a video about it some time ago, so you all can always take a look at it and then you all will understand how water is going to help control temperature, not necessarily only in soil but in our body and in so on and so forth. And at the same time, you must understand water is an essential raw material for photosynthesis. So in one of my previous videos, I had emphasized on photosynthesis quite a lot. So photosynthesis is basically where plants, green plants, produce food and oxygen in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll while absorbing carbon dioxide and water. Now without water, no one can live, not even the plants, and photosynthesis also won't occur. Then oxygen supply will be less, plants will die, so it will be a huge disaster. So it's very important in the photosynthesis of plants as well. Now then, we are going to talk about another one, soil organisms. So soil organisms are basically organisms that live in the soil. If you are an organism and if you live in the soil, you are basically a soil organism. Okay, so those are what you known as soil organisms. Now most of them are visible to our naked eye, but at the same time a majority of them are kind of like not so visible to our naked eye. Okay, some of them can be seen, but some are not visible to our naked eye, and they are called soil microorganisms. So the ones we can see are called soil organisms. The ones we cannot see with our naked eye, that means we have to dress something to our eye in order to see them. And by dress, it doesn't mean a spectacle, but something like a microscope. Okay, if you can only see these organisms via a microscope, that means they are called soil microorganisms. Now, who is a microorganism? They are basically unicellular or multicellular organisms that cannot be seen with the naked eye. So I'm pretty sure you all must have learned this thing in the previous grades, and I will be making a video about them as well. And don't worry, I will be covering all the relevant things for y'all's subject. So now here there are lots of microorganisms that you find, microorganisms as well as organisms you find in the soil, like ants, rover beetles, flatworms, fly larvae, millipedes, snow bugs, earthworms, snails, slugs, and you get this various other animals over here, centipedes, beetles, mites, and even you get fungi and so on and so forth, like the bacteria. Okay, so there are so many soil microorganisms and organisms. And yeah, also I would like to tell everyone that most of you all had requested lessons from me, so if you all have any lessons like that, please do drop them in the comment section below, and I will respond back, and I will do my best to quickly cover that lesson for all of you all. So stay tuned, and I will do my very best to help you all out. Anyway, coming back to the lesson, here we can see a table of soil organisms. These are the ones visible to our naked eye, and over here you will see not visible to our naked eye. So normally these microorganisms like bacteria, fungi, and other unicellular microorganisms are not visible to our naked eye because they are microorganisms. They are micro means normally very small. Okay, so here you can see various pictures of those microorganisms. Okay, some fungi, bacteria. Even here you can see some fungi, bacteria, and other unicellular organisms. Okay, and then you have lots of other visible organisms as well, like I said, beetles, centipede, millipedes, earthworms, houseflies, and this housefly larvae, beetle, and so on, like that. You have so many. And even decaying plants, there are some, like you could take them as soil organisms, but better if you have, better to, like, you know, sort of like write it as a final option, because you have thousands of animals, right? So when you tell an organism, it's better to write an animal for y'all's level, because when you consider plants, it's a bit of a diverse thing. Anyway, now we are going back to do a practical. So we are going to see whether there are microorganisms in soil. Heat some soil. Okay, we are going to take 2 samples of soil, 2 test tubes, and some milk, some cotton stoppers, first and foremost. Once we gather all these things, we are going to take 1 soil sample and heat it and put it into one of these test tubes. Heat one of these test tubes. So we are going to put heated soil into one test tube and non-heated soil into the other test tube. Then we are going to boil the milk, and once it's done boiling and cool down and all those things, we are just going to put that boiled milk into these test tubes. Then you are going to cover the upper part of the test tube with some cotton stoppers. Now, why do you use these cotton stoppers? The reason is, through these cotton stoppers, you can get air into these things. Air will come in. But although air goes in, microorganisms, air will go in, yes, but microorganisms will not enter it. So we can guarantee no organism is going to enter the sample from outside in order to disturb our experiment. Anyway, once you do this thing and keep it for some time, you will notice that the milk in test tube B, that means the one with unheated soil, has coagulated faster than the milk we find in test tube B, which had heated soil. Now, normally they tell you to heat water. What is the main reason to heat water? Basically, what is the main reason? People tell to boil meat before you cook them. Why do they say to basically heat a lots of things we eat? The reason for that is heat can destroy unfavorable microorganisms and pathogens. It doesn't have to be favorable or unfavorable. It can destroy basically most of the microorganisms like that. So when you heated one soil sample, the microorganisms in that were destroyed. Therefore, they couldn't, increase, or they couldn't coagulate the milk quickly, because the amount of microorganisms in the soil was very much lesser than the amount of microorganisms in the unheated soil sample. And here you can see a picture of some coagulated milk. So normally coagulation is sort of like a process used to make cheese, curd and stuff, but basically here you can see a small picture of coagulation of milk. Okay, so I had explained the reason also for why we observe such a thing, and so we can conclude it by saying yes, microorganisms are present in soil. Okay, now I told that there are microorganisms in soil. So why on earth are there microorganisms in soil? One reason is you get these earthworms, a very common microorganism we took for almost all of our explanations over here. So earthworms, they dig holes through the soil. Now here you can see lots of holes have been dug by these earthworms. So they dig these holes through the soil. Then the soil gets loosened and the soil can get air into it. Air can seep into the soil. That's one function. There's another function that there are these microorganisms, right? Soil microorganisms. For an example, like bacteria, they can decay plants and animal dead bodies so that minerals will get into soil. Now, normally as compost, you get lots of plant and animal dead matter or waste matter. So through these things, why do you add compost and all these dead matter and waste matter? They are rich with minerals. So we add these things to the soil in order to enhance the mineral capacity in them. Okay, so they are the functions of soil organisms. One, it loosens the holes and loosens the soil and lets air get into the pores. Second thing, that it decomposes, so decays dead bodies of plants and animals and helps soil get required minerals. Now with that, we have successfully completed part 2. The final part, which is part 3, is on its way. So if you enjoyed this video, learned this lesson very well, don't forget to hit on that like button. Subscribe to my channel if you are new and have not yet subscribed, and share my videos and content with your friends and family, and invite them as well to come and have a good learning experience in science. So hope to see you all next time. Bye.